So here we are, the Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls very first podcast.
Great days.
The crowd goes wild. You can hear the crowds across the world cheering. They've been calling out for this, all couple of them across the world.
Yeah, I can hear our listener applauding.
Exactly, and it's that listener that we're doing this for. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but first of all, episode 1, and it's the most right thing for us to do is to introduce ourselves.
Absolutely.
And for me, I'll take the lead. So, I'm Dave, and I've invented Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls. I've created a TikTok channel that is liked by many, a few,
It's
and an
certainly
Instagram
like
account.
some.
I've done videos that have been liked by David Flatman and Neil Back. I'm more or less in rugby royalty already. But I'm joined here by a very old friend who we used to grace the fields of Essex University Rugby together, making the most fearsome front row those fields had seen for many a year. And that is Rory. Rory,
Hi,
say
yes,
hello.
I'm Rory. Hello, David. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it, and delighted to be collaborating with you once again in a rugby setting. It's been
The world has
more than a
been
decade since we last did it.
the world has been bereft of our skills for far too long.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the world's got a hell of a handbasket ever since.
Well, there we go. That is us two. We are the hosts of this brand new podcast. And this is where I explain to you, the listener, why we're different to all these other rugby podcasts that have been popping up left, right, and centre. And it's obvious. It's because neither me or Rory have ever been professional rugby players. You look at all these other rugby podcasts, they're all ex-players. They don't know what it's like. They don't know what it's like to be a fan.
Absolutely.
So we're doing this.
Cole and Ben Youngs on
Yeah.
their thrones in the sky.
Exactly. All these other pods, they haven't got the exposure we've got to what the real fans experience. So this is what we're bringing to this podcast world in rugby. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers where hopefully if we get past episode 1, a chance for the listener to email in questions and we will answer them based off of our vast knowledge of rugby. We'll be clear. So our specialism, our area of expertise will change week on week, but our constant area of comfortability will be the Gallagher Premiership, because that is our bread and butter. That and England rugby. There is no better place to start on episode 1 of the Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls podcast than to review round 10, because that's how you start a podcast halfway through a season. Round 10 of the Gallagher Premiership.
Context. Well, what a round, can
Well,
I just say? I would say that nearly all those games were brilliant.
yeah, I'd say at least 2 of them were excellent.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, certainly 2. I would say possibly even 3 of those games were brilliant.
I think it's also worth pointing out at this very early stage that we do have slight biases. I am a Northampton Saints fan. I'm a Northampton Saints season ticket holder.
Yes,
Whereas,
if there's a more one-eyed crowd than Franklin's Gardens, I can only think of one, and that's from the Shed. I'm a Gloucester fan,
yeah.
but we're one-eyed for other reasons.
But that is where you may sense over the coming episodes, hopefully years of content, there may be slight biases towards these teams, but we will do our best to present an unbiased and fair opinion.
Yeah.
So,
We've already had my Gloucester hour kiboshed by David.
yes, the Gloucester Hour will be significantly edited out. It will probably remain a figment of imagination for most, other than Rory. But we start in no better way than up in the north, in Kingston Park.
So I still hold a massive candle for Newcastle. I love that there's a bastion of rugby up in that bit of the world. Just doing everything they can to stay alive and just keep going with the good fights for rugby in the northeast, because it's such an underserved part of the world for rugby, and I love that they're still there. So I'm always keen to see Newcastle do well, and obviously they often don't.
Yes.
This was an interesting game.
I thought it was interesting. I felt the scoreline was unfair to Newcastle.
I'd say it flattered Quinn, certainly.
Yeah. You stop the game at the 70-minute mark and there's 3 points in it.
I think whenever I watch Harlequins, they're always billed as the great entertainers.
Yes.
And of course, they are a very entertaining team to watch. There's no doubt about that. Any team with the likes of Marcus Smith and Caden Murley and Tyrone Green, who wasn't playing this weekend, unfortunately, they tend to be entertaining. But you saw a team that I think is potentially struggling a little bit to hold on to that identity, or at least make that identity effective. They really had to revert to a more limited game plan to break down what was, for the most part, very spirited Newcastle performance.
And I think that's what happened for the first 70 minutes. Harlequins, the great entertainers as you described them, were not able to unlock that defence for the most part.
No, and I think the thing with Newcastle is what you see when you watch them is you see a team that is, they've got all the things that having a really good coach, which I do think Steve Diamond is.
Yes, agreed.
They've got all the things that a really good coach can impose on a squad with limitations, right? And their defence was incredibly committed. I think they suffered a bit in the second half when Gordon went off because they couldn't slow down Quinn's ball quite as much. But you can see, the things that you can do with a limited squad are really obvious to Newcastle. The problem they've got is the things that actually, they say money can't buy. It's actually the things that money can buy.
Yes.
And it's physicality and stardust. Those are the things that Newcastle lack, and we know that.
Yeah.
But actually, in terms of squeezing every bit of value out of that squad, I think Diamond's doing, a pretty commendable job with them.
Absolutely. And I also want to put in a shout out for Tom Gordon, because I think he's having an outstanding season so far.
Yeah.
Commendable for performing the way he is in a side that, let's face it, must be very hard to turn out for week in, week out.
I find them an immensely likeable team.
There's very little to dislike about them. If anything, you wish they were able to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. But onto a less likeable team. I think the reality is what you're seeing with Quins this season is a team that has so far struggled to adapt to the loss of Esther Hazen, and actually also I think the loss of Will Collier as well. They don't quite have that set piece dominance that they did. Esther Hazen was such a get out of jail free card for them for those years that he was there, in terms of resetting their face play and their patterns.
Yeah, I definitely think you're onto something with not replacing Esther Hazen, who provided them valuable go forward and kind of that momentum to keep going forwards and pushing the defensive line back, and Will Collier in the set piece, who obviously was very underrated in the Premiership. It's kind of like, we realise how good he is now he's gone. My only issue is they've got Chandler Cunningham South, Alex Dombrandt, Luke Northmore, who, when Esther Hazen and Collier were at Quins, were doing that job as well, who just don't seem to be picking up the slack that has been left in there. Maybe that was what was expected to happen and it hasn't happened, which is why it's not clicking like it used to.
I think Chandler Cunningham South's having a bit of second season syndrome, probably similar to Finn Baxter a little bit, where people sort of expecting him to come in, and that's not to say that he's hit his limits. I still think he's got a pretty high ceiling, but realistically, you have to kick on again once everyone's realised who you are. Again, I think in the same way that Finn Baxter's probably finding a little bit now, he's hit a little bit of a snag in his form, and I'm loath to write him off because he's a young prop, and as a propping advocate, I want to see him do well.
But so to summarise the game, so it ended 38-14 to Harlequins. Newcastle got 2 tries from Adam Radran and Ben Redshaw, who is a really exciting under-20 player who scored a fantastic try off of what I can only assume was a perfectly executed training ground move of deflecting the ball off the corner post. And then for Harlequins, as we said, that it was up to the 70th minute. There was 2 tries both sides there. James Chisholm and Marcus Smith scoring, and then Jack Walker, Oscar Beard, and Sam Riley piled on the pain in the last 10 minutes, along with an excellent kicking performance from Marcus Smith, who we can't deny. Just putting my first stat out there. There are going to be plenty of stats in this podcast, but Marcus Smith this season is at 96% kicking accuracy.
But he's clearly put some focus onto that.
Yeah, and whatever the work he's doing in that department, carry it on, Marcus. Carry it on.
Yeah.
Also, a little shout out I want to make for some of the absolute unsung heroes of the Harlequin side, Jack Kenningham and James Chisholm.
Absolute grafters. And James Chisholm, I think, is actually having a very good season.
I agreed. And I think that's partly because the likes of Don Brandt and Cunningham South are having quiet seasons by their standards. So Quins are looking at using the likes of Chisholm to step up and kind of take the workload off of them. And it's working.
Yeah.
Were there any other points on Quins Newcastle that you observed from your throne of rugby?
No, I think the only thing I would say to look out for, Northmore at 12. I think, he's been in and out of the England squad. 12 obviously being a big problem position at the moment. My gut feel is him playing 12 for Quins is in a bid to try and lock that down for England.
Yeah, I agree. He was in the camp for the Autumn Internationals. Didn't get a minute, like a number of players who probably should have got a minute.
Yes, my Quinn supporting friend was spitting feathers about the fact that he never didn't play against Japan.
Okay, we're going into your wheelhouse now, Rory.
Absolutely great, fantastic.
Gloucester versus Sale.
Oh, what a game!
Tell me your thoughts.
So, look, I think trying to remain slightly grounded on it, Gloucester needed to have a big bounce back after what was a frankly dreadful performance against Exeter, where they didn't get off the bus. You can always count on Gloucester to hand a struggling team a morale-boosting win.
I must say I am very frustrated I didn't start this 1 week earlier, just to start off on that round.
I wouldn't have said yes a week earlier. There was basically a conversation at the end of last season from the CEO, Alex Brown, to George Skivington, the Gloucester head coach, saying, you got to play better rugby, because last season was pretty dross to watch. We just kicked the leather off it and did that quite badly. So the big change really for us has been the signing of Thomas Williams, who has been possibly the league's best player.
Signing of the season.
But his ability to run the show, because actually we brought in Gareth Anscombe as well, and Anscombe's been good, but he's not been quite as good as maybe we thought he would have been.
No, it's been more obvious when Williams has been missing than when Anscombe's been missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the try he scored was genuine world class. There's no other way to look at it.
The only thing I want to say with Gloucester is, how comfortable are you with seemingly becoming the 5th region of Wales? And I'm not saying this in a bad way, because it seems
with the Welsh Academy.
The Gloucester's influence this season seems to be coming from what is the resurgence of Max Llewellyn, who is playing out of his skin.
Yeah,
Josh Hathaway, who is the young diamond who's been uncovered, who is basically Lewis Rees-Zammit reborn, but with a scrum cap on. Yep. You've got Thomas Williams and Gareth Anscombe. You've got probably one that's got away from England in Freddie Thomas.
Yeah,
I think that core of Welsh players
they've been fantastic.
Is playing a huge part for why Gloucester are doing so well. Is there a worry that...
Always. We've just re-signed Freddie Thomas to another contract, so for now he's staying.
Yeah.
There's always a worry that they'll want to go back. I mean, it's quite a typical thing with the Welsh. They have that bit of heriaeth and they want to go home. There's always... I think the bigger worry is with the performances of someone like Thomas Williams. Some serious money is going to get waved in front of it, and then how do you replace someone like that? Which is a problem that we often have, because we are one of the teams that has to live within our means more than others. So, at the risk of turning this into Gloucester outlet, I think that the turnaround this thing's been remarkable for us, and the performance of the weekend was an example of one of those weeks when it really goes right for us against what has been largely a very dogged and tough to break down Sale side.
Yes, this is a Sale side that beat Bristol at Ashton Gate and nilled them just a week before.
A shutout at Ashton Gate. I mean, we won at Ashton Gate, but it was 44-41.
Yeah,
that's a very different kind of performance.
Any time you're playing Sale is a very difficult game.
It was a little bit archetypal Alex Sanderson type team, pretty much playing 9-man rugby for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Very, very much focused on the driving maul. And, they've got a superb pack. On paper, that pack is outrageous. You got the Curry twins and the Dupria twins.
Yeah, I haven't got too much more to add on this. I think you're quite right that Sale just played archetypal Sanderson rugby. No thrills, not incredibly exciting to watch. I'd be incredibly frustrated if I was maybe Tom O'Flaherty or Tom Roebuck, because you're very limited.
Is one of the things. Yeah, this is one of the things I wanted to mention on this. I mean, if you take Rafi Quirk and George Ford out of the side, you are going to lose a bit of attacking flair unless you are very blessed in those departments. One of the notes I made was back three was wasted, because, as you say, they've got a fabulous back three.
Most of their role seems to be on the kick chase.
Yeah, which they're good at.
Which they are very good at, but
it's not all they are.
Yes. So to summarise the game finished 36-20 Gloucester in Gloucester's favour. Bonus point win for the Cherry and Whites, which helps them in their playoff chase, because it's definitely still on. Tries were for Santi Carreras, 2 for Max Llewellyn, 1 for Josh Hathaway, and 1 for Thomas Williams. That Welsh core delivering again. And for Sale, 1 for Curry, Luke Cowan-Dickey, and Tom Roebuck. Moving swiftly on to what I will describe as probably the segment and fixture we'll probably spend the least time discussing.
This wouldn't be Tigers Chiefs, would it?
Oh, it is Tigers Chiefs.
I watched this today. Well, this was a poor game. This was a poor game by two sides that don't quite know who they are at the moment. I mean, Exeter's troubles are pretty well documented. I think, coming off the win against Gloucester, they should have been. They should have really bounced on from that, and they were obviously competitive this game. And they had probably had an opportunity to win it before. Was it Will Riggs?
Will Riggs on fire.
Yellow card. Yeah, Will Riggs on fire. Freddie Stewart's terrified. It was a pretty tough watch as on the whole. I think Tigers are an interesting side in the sense of I don't quite know if they're good or not. But every time I watch them, I just think there's something not working here, because they are pretty dull to watch.
So what I will say is Cheika's definitely brought in a positive change to probably the last 2 years of Leicester, which, albeit very effective in previous years, we're saying they're a bit dull now. They were very dull last year, the year before, where it's very predictable. Classic Leicester rugby of set piece dominance, possession, territory. Anything else beyond that means nothing. And another try picked up by Ollie Hassel-Collins, who seems to be refinding the Ollie Hassel-Collins of London Irish days.
Well, one of the few notes I did make from this game was, is Ollie Hassel-Collins likely to get a call up again? Because I think he's well up there in the try. I think he's joint top scorer now. I think they said
joint top scorer. So the only question mark with him is it called up in a white shirt, or does he switch allegiance to the red shirt?
I mean, he might well do, because he might think, well, yeah, I might get called up for this one, but with the players that are coming back into that back three, how long am I going to be in there for? I think he's got to be in the conversation, and I like that he's pretty unashamedly different. I think
there is room for personality in the sport, and I welcome someone trying to be something that isn't just the normal stereotypical straight-laced rugby guy.
On the Chiefs side of the equation,
yes, Exeter,
back to being very average again. I think, unfortunately, for them, it's a team. It's a strange team to look at, really, the Exeter one, because outside of Henry Slade, you look at it and you go, there's not much stardust there, really. There's not much of a
No.
of a point of difference.
So you've got your Manny Boso, you've got your Henry Slade.
Yeah, of course, Fanny Failbase is not playing, obviously.
Not playing at the moment, but when he is playing,
yes.
But yeah. I would probably agree with you there that you stop at those two, and the stardust is a little bit fainter. And that I think they overperformed last year ridiculously, which has kind of set these expectations of them being this really good side. I think people need to realise that this is not the Exeter of their prime double winning season. Like, this is a whole new project.
I don't think they're playing in a way that is getting the best out of them.
No.
So they made the point on the commentary about Zach Wimbush, who I think has got real potential. Right, 6'5" at 12-13.
Very excited.
That's a kid. That's a kid I want to watch play.
Very excited for Wimbush. Very excited for Wimbush.
When I watched them, when I have watched them this season, they look a team short on power and really short on confidence. One really good Henry Slade crossfield kick aside that led to the try, which was great. We all know he's capable of that kind of thing, but they seem to be a little bit scared to play at times.
Yeah, I agree. There was literally nothing else of note beyond that crossfield kick for me. Is Slade at 10 a viable thing going forward for Exeter? Like, how long? How long?
Solution.
How long do you keep that plaster on that patch?
It can't be a long-term solution for them, because you're not getting the best out of Slade, and he's not getting the best out of his backline.
To summarise, Tigers actually got the bonus point win. They won 28-15. It was right.
6 tries.
Like, which is unbelievable to think there were 6 tries in that game, because it was very dull. The yellow card for Wilrig just changed everything, and then Ben Youngs comes on and scores a try in the twilight of his career. Him and Dan Cole, what a job they're doing for the older generation of players, scoring tries for their side. But 2 tries from Tommy Wyatt wasn't enough from Exeter. They were found unstuck, and they go back to Devon with nothing to show for it. We're talking Saracens Bristol.
We certainly are. This was really, really good fun to watch. Primarily because of one player.
And we haven't compared notes beforehand, but I knew the second you said that we're talking about Tom Willis here. If he doesn't get picked in the Six Nations squad, I genuinely think we need to send out some sort of psychiatric assistance to the RFU headquarters into Borthwick's office and say, "Are you okay?"
Who knew he had that kind of toe?
Oh, it was beautiful. That step.
Lolloping.
That step to the commentary team described it perfectly. The defender thought he was just going to barge him, but no, he gracefully danced past him. He's been doing it all season. The man has basically everything in the locker. He can play hard and he can play beautifully.
I've really enjoyed watching Saracens this season, and one of the reasons why, aside from the form of Tom Willis, is one of the most astute signings in Fergus Burke, who's, I think, at the fly half has slotted in seamlessly, and in some ways has elevated Saracens beyond what Owen Farrell was doing previously, which seems bizarre to say that anyone could improve on what Owen Farrell was achieving for Saracens.
So this may be the first of many times where we're not here to agree with each other all the time. So I'm not going to sit here and say Fergus Burke has been a bad signing. I'm not going to say that. But I think he's been good. But I think the reason people are saying that he is kind of. I agree to some extent that he has moved Saracens on a level, but I think it's because it's no longer the Farrell show. I think Burke is there in a much more understated role, and he's allowing others around him to shine. And it's not a bad thing. I've not seen enough of Burke for me to think he is the next best thing in the fly half shirt.
Maybe it's a case of dissipating the kind of responsibility that Owen Farrell shouldered throughout the team as much as anything, because the likes of Lazowski, Ben Earl, Maritoje, obviously Jamie George as well, they seem to be playing as well as they ever have. And you line that up with good signings like, I mean, Reece Carey, I think, has been a really good re-signing for them. He
looks a different player to when he was first there.
Phil Brantingham signed from Newcastle in this sort of the understudy role that Lou said. He looks a really, really good player.
Good prospect.
And you got two of Argentina's best players in Cinti and Gonzalez, who's, oh my God,
he is
a freak.
I'm not the biggest Saracens fan. I'm not afraid to admit that they are probably 10th on my favourite list of clubs in the Premiership. But that man, I could watch him play any day of the week. He is so good.
He seems to be the point of difference in every game that I watch him in, international and club game.
Yeah, he doesn't have bad games.
No, he just doesn't. They're looking a really tough prospect against Saracens.
Yeah, all of a sudden they're actually quite dangerous. And everyone thought, with everyone they lost last year, the Vunipola, Exodus, Farrell leaving, I thought, okay, there's no chance Saracens are going to be as dangerous as they were. But actually, I think they're more dangerous now, because I feel like they can beat you in multiple ways. What went wrong for Bristol?
Well, losing McGinty. That's been their problem so far, since this sort of drop in form. Yeah,
there's a reason they've signed Harry Byrne on the short-term contract,
who I think could be a really shrewd sign for them.
It's just whether there's enough time to get him up to speed. That's the only question mark for me.
Was reading that when Leinster played Bristol earlier in the season, Harry Byrne played as McGinty in the sort of training opposition.
Interesting.
So the opposition
style.
See, it's maybe not entirely unfamiliar. How much that's going to translate long term, who knows? But he looks a good sign to me. And actually, given how stacked the 10 shirt is for Ireland, he may well be someone that Bristol look at and go, can we get him over on a permanent basis? Yeah. McGinty's not getting any younger.
He's 34.
I mean, so he's one of the few players in the league left still older than us, certainly older than me.
Yes. That list is growing ever shorter every year.
yeah. May Alex Good live forever.
Alex Good, I hope you got more years left in you yet still, because I'm relying on you.
I think they'll be all right. And I'm loath to stay as a Gloucester fan, because obviously I never want to see Bristol do well, but I suspect they'll turn around this blip in form. But they are going to have to get Harry Byrne up to speed very quickly to have a chance of doing that. They had some good moments in this game, and they got the try bonus, didn't they?
I do kind of feel Saracens gave them the try bonus, but yes.
Yeah, they did. They did somewhat. So they came away with a point. Could have had two had Harry Byrne's kick not just swung past at the last possible second. It looked like it went over the post. He was pretty unlucky with that one. But so anyone can go to Saracens and lose.
Yes. But the game ended Saracens 35, Bristol 26. Tries for Saracens was 2 for Tom Willis, 2 for Fergus Burke, and 1 for Lucio Cinti. Then Bristol's tries came from Harry Randall, Calavetti Revuvu, Harry Thacker, and Jake Heenan in the last dying moments. Bonus point for Bristol to send themselves back to Ashton Gate, at least with something to pat themselves on the back. Now, we're talking about Northampton versus Bath.
I'm going to shorten my summary of this game to just wow.
Yes. First of all, what an absolute advertisement for the sport, for the league, and if only that was aired on primetime ITV, because the fan problem we've got in rugby at the moment would no longer be the case, because that was such a spectacle.
If you've got a partner, parent, friend, boss, anyone that you're trying to get somewhat interested in rugby, just sit them down in front of that game, because that was superb, with two of my least favourite teams in the country. And I had to tip my hat and say this was absolutely fantastic. It really, really picked up my Sunday.
Yeah, it had everything. It had drama, it had excitement, it had rain, it had yellow cards, it had controversy.
I mean, to set the scene somewhat, Saints flying out of the traps with 3 tries in the first 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, it was insane.
Ludicrous. Alex Mitchell looking like the best 9 in the world, apart from Dupont. But Alex Mitchell looked fantastic. Finn Smith played as well as I've seen him, and I've seen him play well a few times. Just within the 3 days or 2 days since that performance, the spike in social media posts about should Finn Smith start at 10 for England have quadrupled.
Quite rightly.
Quite rightly, and it's definitely a conversation that's got to be had. I'm not advocating for it, because I still think Marcus Smith is the man in possession of that shirt, as far as I'm concerned. But what I would say is Finn Smith needs to be given opportunities to do it. Probably will be in the summer, realistically, looking at the tours, but he looks and is a quality prospect there. But the man I really want to talk about is the Ginger Flash, George Hendy, who every time I watch him, I cannot believe that he's that good at rugby.
The way he moves, just nothing adds up. But whatever the sum of those parts are, the outrageous sum that is the physical makeup of George Hendy, whatever the answer is, I like it.
If you take all the parts, desired parts of a human you'd put together to create a rugby player, George Hendy looks like the antithesis of that. He looks like all the discarded parts put together, and somehow they've come together just to create this phenomenal player who just flies past players. I love watching him. And for me, he's in the conversation for England again, not to keep going back to this on the English squad, because we will get to it another time. But for me, he's looked one of the best players in the league this season, even in a struggling outfit.
As George Hendy, he has this inane ability to just break tackles, make meters, glide past defenders, which just, it doesn't make sense, but it works. Like, he is top of the league in meters per carry. That's above any other winger, any other fullback, any centre, scrum half. He is number one. He averages over 10 metres per carry he makes.
If you're playing off a set piece in particular, and Saints have got a pretty good set piece, having those kind of options, and you can really see how Sam Vesty puts this together, because I think Sam Vesty's a really talented coach for putting a set piece move together. Their first phase play is terrifying for any opposition. Every time you go, well, Saints have got a line out on the halfway line. Well, there's a good chance they'll bloody score this then.
Yes, and I can say, as a Saints fan, it's bloody exciting.
What they've done ever since the old miserable Kiwi was in charge there. What was his name?
Chris Boyd.
Chris Boyd, that's it. The work that he did on skill sets in that club
changed everything. Absolutely
changed everything. And then throwing in Phil Dowson's kind of nous for the game. He's got a really good rugby mind, I think, and he's very personable. He's a good face for a coaching team, Phil Dowson. But add into that Sam Vesty's eye for an attack, and your
signing of the season last year, Lee Radford, defence coach.
The defence coach, Lee Radford, that's right. What he's done with the defence, which was before last season, the year before, from memory, very leaky. That as a coaching team, that's like the perfect kind of marry up for me.
I'm glad we've done a lot of praise for Northampton, and it's warranted.
Yes.
Warranted after this performance.
We should talk about the other element here, because an almost as good performance right up until that last kick of the game from Bath, who bounced back from a shellacking in the first quarter to score some fantastic tries themselves. Who knew Focken and Singer had that kind of top end toe?
I'd forgotten he'd still had it in him. And I had to double take when I saw that they scored 5 tries. And lost.
Yeah. If you score 5 tries and lose, I mean, you can only take some comfort in the fact that you were definitely in a brilliant game.
Yeah.
Big shout outs for me would go to Sam Underhill, who had come on early, drafted in from the 7-1 split, which looked a strange decision, but in the end worked out almost okay for them. So Underhill was brilliant. Again, how he didn't get a central contract, I'll never know. But he was fantastic when he came on. Miles Reed was brilliant. Alfie Barbary had his best game I've seen for a while. He looks like a proper athlete.
He definitely had the best game I've seen him play in a long time. And it's really good to see him play more than 50 minutes, because it seems it was customary that he just got subbed off at the 50-minute mark every game for Jaco Coetzee.
He's got ambitions about where he wants to go with his career, which, you know, he's been talked up a lot. Yeah. But the thing that was missing was, did anyone look at him and go, that's an 80-minute international player? I remember the game where he was sick halfway through it.
Yeah.
Partly because of the effort he put in, but I also think partly because he looked quite clearly hungover.
And I'm sure I'm sure he wouldn't disagree. But can we talk about an individual? He's been all over social media. Ollie Lawrence.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you pulled this up because controversially, I loved it.
Which part? Because for me, there are two.
Smirk.
Okay, the smirk. So there are 2 or 3 elements for me that are
I didn't like the dog shot on Hendy. I didn't like the dog shot on Hendy.
So the dog shot on Hendy for me felt it was late. It was a late tackle. The referee agreed it was a late tackle, but I felt it was a no arms tackle, shoulder charge. I'm not going to be naive enough to say yes, he probably knew Hendy was carrying a knock, and yes, he probably knew it would hurt him a bit more. It's rugby. Sometimes you do things like that. The smirk, for me, I was in the stadium. I will defend him slightly. That, let's just say, the atmosphere towards him was, let's say, a little frosty. I don't know how well it came across on the TV cameras and the microphones, but let's just. Did you hear the second incident where Ollie Lawrence may have took a little tumble after getting a graze to his nose from Alex Mitchell, and the penalty taken by Finn Russell? I have never heard Franklin's Gardens echo with boos so loudly, which I, for one, will say not a fan of, because for me, if you're booing Finn Russell, he's more likely to make that kick.
Alex Mitchell does get him with a head-on-head. It's accidental. He just gets in the wrong line at the wrong time, but it is a head-on-head, and Ollie Lawrence played it up. That is what happens.
Does he go down if that was in the 10th minute of the first half? No.
He's also conscious that this is potentially the game-winning kick. And, all right, it's cynical. It's a cynical way to play the game. But come the end of the season, if that's the thing that makes sure you get number 1 in the table and get the home slot, is anyone going back and going, you took a bit of a soft one to win that game at Franklin's Gardens? Probably not. No, so I'm all right with it.
Well, I'd also cynically say, if he had carried on playing and let play carry on, the TMO may have called it back, and then they may have well been taking that kick in the 80th minute rather than the 77th.
Yeah, it's all very ifs, buts, and maybes, isn't it?
Well, if we can't talk about ifs, buts, and maybes, Rory, our podcast series isn't going to last very long.
That's true. That's a good podcast. Live and die on hypotheticals.
But what poetic justice! That final kick from Finn Smith. Thing of beauty. That's composure. That's how you know he is test match ready.
The kick aside, the Finn Smith moment for me was when he absolutely leathered Miles Reed when
Beautiful.
Bath were on a very promising attack, and he dumped him backwards. Miles is a good player, had a really good season. The big back rower running at pace, and Finn Smith slotted him.
I think it's his defensive side of the game for me. It's what, for me personally, sets him out as more of a Test match 10 than the incumbent at present, who I respect currently has possession of the shirt. So here's my final question to you on that game. If you were an alien beamed down onto Earth and asked the question, well, exactly, and you've got no prior history of rugby, and you're asked to say who should be the Lions 10 based off of that performance,
I'm still saying Finn Russell, because the best way, if Finn Russell made his kicks, he looked. He still pulled the strings in that game really well. The only thing I would say is by the end of it, he looked shagged.
Fair enough.
Just
maybe it's my bias.
It's not a lot.
Because I thought Finn Smith won the 10 battle on that day. So that game ended 35-34 to Northampton. Tries for Josh Kameni, who actually brilliant signing, he's been for Northampton. Fraser Dingwall, James Ram with a great try, and George Hendy quickly becoming everyone's favourite player. Bath hitting back with 2 tries from Thokula Singer, a try for Will Stewart, Max Ajomo, and
Orlando Bailey. Really good finish.
Yeah, really good game from Orlando Bailey. Now we go into a world of, let's just do something a bit different. Let's do some segments, because it's a podcast. We talk about more than just one round of rugby. So
come on, segments. I love segments.
Here's a couple of segments for you listeners. This segment is going to be stats versus vibes. So let me hit you with some stats.
Please.
Kapow! Juan Martin Gonzalez, how many tackles do you think he made this weekend?
He's pretty up there. Did he hit double figures?
He didn't hit double figures. He smashed double figures. He made 28 tackles.
Yeah, he looked like he was having a great game from a vibe perspective.
Now, to counter that, a player who I think you are a massive fan of, Viliami Bill Matter.
I do like Bill Matter.
Could you guess how many tackles he missed for Bristol?
Missed? Or I would imagine he missed more than one. Well, I think he struggled in that game.
Well, I can tell you, it's the first time this season any player hit double figures and missed tackles. He missed 10 tackles.
Wow.
Little bit of information for you, Rory. I'm going to tell you this and you're going to say, wow.
Please.
Of the top 10 offloaders in the league, would you believe that 4 of them, of the top 10 in the entire league of all players, 4 of them, could you guess what club they play for?
Well, knowing your biases, would they play for Saints?
No, Bristol Bears. And then, so my point will come now, I point this out. Of the top 10 dominant tacklers in the league, so percentage of dominant tackles, there is a team that has 6 of the top 10. Could you guess what team that is?
I mean, if you were to say Bristol again, I'd be surprised. I would have guessed Sale.
Ding, 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 ding. So those stats for me, the fact that Bristol have the top 10 offloaders and Sale have 6 of the top 10 dominant tacklers, that is how stats can tell you the style of play of a team. Because Bristol have this abandoned way of just throwing the ball around left, right, centre. It's no surprise that 4 of the top 10 players in the league have the most offloads, and then Sale, who are just known for being so physical, that they've got 6 of the top 10 most dominant tackles. This is why stats are important.
Yeah, I suppose what I'll you is I've watched both those teams. I could have told you both those things without looking at the stats.
But back it up. Now tell me about your vibes.
No, vibe-wise, I think the league as a whole has been a vibe for much of this season. We touched on. I say we touched on Gloucester. We spent quite a long time talking about Gloucester at my own insistence.
Yes.
But actually, if you look at of the top 8 teams, barring probably Sale, all of those teams are playing a pretty exciting brand of rugby. Even Saracens playing an exciting brand of rugby, much belied to their recent history. If you're looking for vibes, I'm just going to go back to George Hendy. That's vibes for me. That man exudes vibes.
Someone who I think is quickly going to become our favourite player collectively.
Yeah, I mean, he's well up there for me already. Yeah. And it's the other end of the spectrum. This is someone who does get talked about quite a bit, but I did want to talk about him briefly, which you'll like, is Junior Augustus, who is, I mean, he might be the most Greek god-looking player on the planet. He just looks sculpted for rugby.
Absolute Apollo.
I imagine you're absolutely disgusted that he's leaving for Ulster next season.
It's a very tricky, bitter, horrendous pill to swallow because he is such an effective, important ball carrier and outlet for Northampton Saints at the back of that scrum. And very difficult to replace.
My vibes on vibes moment was George Hendy tapping back the kickoff to Junior Augustus running in to collect it. Just a lovely little moment of vibes on vibes.
Vibes on vibes.
Junior Augustus, I think, has been such a good point of difference for you guys. He's so effective, and he just looks terrifying to tackle, and I like that a lot. I like a back rower who looks utterly terrifying.
Yeah. So my next segment I was going to suggest for you, Rory, is I was going to play a stat game for you of higher or lower.
Go on.
Who's passed the ball more? Finn Baxter or Tommy Freeman this season?
Well, that's an interesting one. Because Finn Baxter does play a bit of rugby. He does like to check around a bit. And Tommy Freeman's on the wing. So actually, you're often receiving the last pass. There's less chance. I'm going to say Finn Baxter.
Correct. Finn Baxter, in 563 minutes of rugby, has passed the ball 33 times. Tommy Freeman, on the other hand, has 27 times in 589 minutes. As you say, he's often at the end of the move. Very rarely the one reliant on passing the ball. So, correct. 1 out of 1 for Rory there. Next question. Who has made more metres per carry? Manny Feuerboso or Christian Wade?
So I think there's two factors that are going to make me say Christian Wade on this. No, it's 3 factors, one of which is post roster. The other factors are, I think Feuerboso carries through traffic more, so there's probably less chance of him making quite as many metres. And Gloucester have utilised their wingers very effectively this season. Christian Wade obviously being a beneficiary of that. So I'm going to say Wade for that reason.
In which case you are now 2 from 2. Good reasoning. This is why stats are so much fun, Rory. So yeah, Feuerboso, 6.5 metres per carry in 513 minutes of rugby. Christian Wade, 8 metres per carry in 465 minutes of rugby. Okay, here's another tricky one, which may challenge your biases and my own. Deliberately chosen a Gloucester player and a Saints player to compare here.
Oh.
Who has made more metres? Freddie Thomas or Curtis Langdon?
Interesting, because Freddie Thomas made quite a few line breaks, and he's very mobile. He has made quite a few line breaks, and he's run the ball in from quite far out for a few scores. He's either scored or assisted on. But Curtis Langdon is very, very mobile, and he's used a lot in that way. I would probably guess Curtis Langdon, just on the basis of, I think he's probably played more games than Freddie Thomas, but he's also, I suspect, had more opportunity to carry the ball.
Freddie Thomas has played 566 minutes of Premiership rugby.
Yeah.
Curtis Langdon has played 618 minutes.
I'm going to stick with Langdon just on the base, although he's not been as effective this season as he was last season.
Okay. So,
first thought, best thought. I'm going to say Langdon.
Okay.
I think you'll have just picked a Saints player.
So you fell right into my trap. Very good. You're 2 out of 3. So Curtis.
Oh, it was Freddie Thomas.
It was Freddie Thomas. So Curtis
He's
Langdon.
A fabulous season.
Carried 172 metres this season, which for a hooker, very, very good. But Freddie Thomas, 184 metres carried. As you say, he's had a few clean breaks. That certainly helps his cause. But yeah, I've deliberately chosen two very good.
Phenomenal for a second row.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Next segment, well, not segment. We'll just do a very, very quick run through. So it's European rugby coming up. So I'm going to read out the fixtures. You tell me who you think is going to win. I'll tell you who I'm going to, and then we'll compare next week, the next podcast, how many we got right.
I've got these all written down. I've already picked my winners. Come on.
Okay.
I've got
Glasgow versus Racing.
Glasgow. Racing have been a bit up and down this season at best. Farrell being called as being a flop in France. How that's happened, I don't know. Yeah, Glasgow looking really good at the URC. Really good maul. Really good all-round team. Yeah, Glasgow to win that one.
Completely agree. Stormers versus Sale.
Stormers versus Sale. I've got the Stormers dependent on the team that Sale take. I don't know if Sale are taking a good team or not.
So
Stormers aren't having a great season, but I suspect with travel, and I think Sale probably won't target Europe now.
Yes, I agree. I've gone Stormers for the same reason. I think Sale will probably aim for like the Challenge Cup 5th spot in the pool. They probably won't target this round. They'll probably target next round. It's a tough visit to go to South Africa to Stormers away. So I think Stormers get that win. And I think Stormers will want to win because they're currently bottom of pool 4. So I can't see past Stormers. Okay, probably quite an easy one this. Exeter versus Bordeaux.
Oh, right. Well, it's Biobere, Penno and Jaminet. It doesn't matter who you're playing, really, apart from maybe Leinster and Toulouse. It's Bordeaux.
Bordeaux. Not much more needs to be said. I can't see beyond a Bordeaux win, even if it's at Stanley Park.
It's the best reason this weekend to go to Devon is to go and watch Bordeaux.
Agreed. Okay, big game this. Sharks versus Toulouse.
So I've got Toulouse winning this because Toulouse are travelling. They are taking the big boys. They had Capuozzo at 9 last weekend to keep DuPont fresh for this weekend.
He is a man on a mission, and if DuPont's a man,
Capuozzo very good at 9, you know. But yeah, Toulouse are going to go there, and I think Sharks. I don't think are having the best season in the URC, and they've not started Europe brilliantly.
They're 4th in the pool.
Mad in the squad they've got.
Yeah.
Their squad is phenomenal, and I don't know how they're not doing well in every game they do. But I think Toulouse go there and win. I think Toulouse have gone there with a bit between their teeth to do bits in Europe again this year.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Toulouse to win that, and I think DuPont is going there to show that he can do it in the Southern Hemisphere as well as the Northern.
So I think he's going to shut his fans up.
Yes, and I think he will. Okay, Munster versus Saracens.
Yeah, I've got Saracens to win this. It's Munster away, which in days of old when the European Cup was the European Cup, the Heineken Cup, as it was when we were growing up, when it had a real luster to it. Torn Park was impenetrable, and you'd never expect to go there and win. And if you ever won there, it was cause célèbre. But I think Saracens probably go there and win. So I don't think Munster is.
It's not the
good as they have.
It's not what it used to be. Saints showed you can go there and beat them in their home ground last year. I think Saracens do the same.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they're good enough to do it.
And Jack Crowley is currently at a 30% kicking average in the URC.
I mean, I was going to say, is he kicking in a hurricane? But if it's at Torn Park, he might well be kicking in a hurricane.
He may well be, yeah. Okay, Stade Francais versus Northampton Saints.
Saints. Stade Francais having a bad season. They're just going to focus on the top 14 because they are in a relegation battle now. Saints are going to go and win. Stade are probably going to play out the under-18s.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. The only concern I have is Stade in their last 2 games have basically been trying to beat up their opponents and injure them. I don't think Northampton can take too many more injuries, so I just hope we come back that with just 5 points rather than 5
Yeah, run around them.
Yeah, I agree. Northampton to win. Leicester versus Ulster.
I've got Tigers to win this. The note I've put here is not game of the week. I'm not sure this is going to be one to tune in for. If I'm honest, I don't know what the clash is with.
That's the one to plan your dinner plans over, isn't it?
I think it's going to be a pretty poor game.
I've
all in all.
gone Leicester to win, and I think agreed it'll be a typical Welford Road slugfest that won't be great for the neutral. And Cast versus Bulls. I've got Cast to win.
Yeah, I've got Cast. Have you ever been to watch a game there? It's great.
No, but I imagine it's great fun.
I've been there a couple of times. Great. Cast's not a big town, but they've got this great big stadium in the middle of it, basically in a residential area.
Lovely.
And they absolutely love it. Cast, I think, run the lowest wage bill in the top 14, but just have this absolute knack of putting squad together. They win like the top 14 like every 7 or 8 years because they just build this squad up to this one moment and then it all dissipates immediately.
Aren't they like unbeaten at home for like 20 games or something like that?
Yeah, they're phenomenal at home, and it's a really good hostile ground. Proper old school French hostile ground, and you can walk across the pitch after the game, that kind of thing. It's
Toulon versus Quins.
Yeah, I've got Toulon to win this one. I think the old Saints expats are as well as Carl Sinclair's still there, isn't he, as well?
Yeah.
I think Toulon wins this one. I think Quins have got enough to beat them on this occasion.
Toulon are finding form. They're playing really well. Top 14. They're doing well in the Champions Cup.
They look good again there.
They're looking good.
Although Olivon apparently has ruptured his ACL, which could be an issue for them because he's obviously Stardust.
That is an issue for them and for France.
Yeah.
So far, we are in agreement on everything. Where do you stand on La Rochelle versus Leinster?
Yeah, I've got this as game of the week. I've gone La Rochelle.
That's our first disagreement. I've gone Leinster.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably gone La Rochelle because of that La Rochelle. Other than that, it's difficult to necessarily justify that. Although I think La Rochelle are having a good season.
Yeah.
I don't know that they've obviously Leinster sort of beat the hoodoo on them, but I think La Rochelle at home are probably still strong enough to win this game, although they will have to play probably at their peak.
I've just gone Leinster. I just think that they are this year targeting Champions Cup with every fibre in their being. I think they've got a full strength squad to pick from other than James Lowe. I think that's the first one we've disagreed on. So far, so good. Bristol versus Benetton.
I've gone Bristol in this one, although I don't think it's a foregone conclusion.
I've gone Bristol to win this, and I think they will be targeting this because if they beat Benetton, it basically means because I don't see Benetton winning another game. I think that win against Bath was probably a one-off.
Yeah.
If Bristol beat Benetton and if they get 5 points, it brings them above Benetton in the table, and they just kind of cement that 5th space for the Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably the peak of Bristol can achieve in the tournament now. And then Bath versus Clermont.
I've got Bath to win this one. I think this is when Bath's European campaign turns around. I think they've underperformed in Europe, obviously, having lost the first 2, although, obviously anyone can lose against La Rochelle. The loss against Benetton was obviously a bit unexpected for them, but I suspect they'll turn it around at this point. I think Clermont aren't particularly strong in relative terms, although I think they've got a decent young team.
I think Clermont will win this one. I think this game is more important to Clermont than it is to Bath.
Interesting. I'm going to check where Clermont are in the top 14 because I think there's always an element of Clermont was 4th in the top 14, right? So they're going quite well. Yeah. But they may also want to concentrate on making the what they call it, the bouclage or whatever it is.
Yeah. So this was my out there pick of Clermont to beat Bath because I also it's at
Bath.
I
don't hate it. But I suspect that won't be right. I don't think Clermont will travel. Is my suspicion.
That's also a fair point. Famously, French teams, especially Clermont, don't travel very well. Well, that we've agreed on all bar 2, which shows we've still got some pretty like-minded thinking, which is good to know. So that just leaves us for the end, the Q&A section. Obviously, this is episode 1. Very difficult.
Do we have any cues?
Very difficult for cues to be sent in when we haven't sent anything out. So I asked on my TikTok for I've got a couple of questions. try not to dig too deeply into these because some of these are meaty questions.
Okay.
The first one, which I think you've seen, is has Finn Baxter gone backwards?
I think there's a few things in play here with Finn Baxter. We mentioned it. We mentioned it a bit earlier. I think he's played too much rugby for a young player in such a physical position. I think he needs to be taken out the firing line a little bit and given the chance to reset a little bit. I think there's a player there still. I'm not willing to put the boot in on him just yet. But and I will always advocate for a young English prop, particularly at the moment. So gone backwards is probably unfair, but he's certainly out of form. And I think he's going to have to come to terms with what is required to be an international adult men's prop. And you can have the most baby face in the world. There's no issue with that whatsoever. But what you probably can't be is anything other than a physical freak. And I think that's probably the next jump. And he's, best at what is he, 22? If that?
If that.
So he's still got a bit of room for development there, right? He's got a bit of the puppy fat to probably come off, which I say completely hypocritically, as I'm still carrying.
I'm still waiting for my puppy fat. Yeah.
Yeah. What I've got to do is eat less puppies. But
just a quick disclaimer for the podcast: Rory hasn't eaten any puppies.
If he wants to maintain that central contract and maintain his position in the England squad, he's going to have to push on a bit. And I suspect what he's going to have to do is ask Ellis Genge, what did you do to get in that kind of nick? Because I need to do that. And if he wants to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that he's not, phenomenal athlete already, but actually you got to be a freak.
I agree. I do think maybe he's just adjusting to no longer being the Joe Marler prodigy and being the main man now, and it's just taking a bit of adjusting. There's more expected of him now. There's more on his shoulders, both figuratively and metaphorically. Maybe it's just an adjustment period. I am also not writing off Finn Baxter. I've long been advocating his qualities. I can see how good he is, but I do agree. Maybe a bit more physical freakness is required, but I still can't forget the job he done on Ben Tamifuna in Bordeaux last year.
Yeah.
So, final question I've got is: are England immediately less potent now Emmanuel Feu-Boso is out of the Six Nations?
Well, I think any team would miss Feu-Boso. I think the fortunate thing for England in a sense is that winger is actually a position of real strength at the moment. So you've got Flyhome, Freeman, Roebuck, Collins, George Hendy, if you wanted to put in there, but I would. I think it's a problem if you don't find a way to carry through traffic in other areas, because that's something Feu-Boso really brings. I think you probably have to move Lawrence to 13 to get him carrying through traffic in wider areas, because I think we're losing a bit of his effectiveness at 12. And I know that people will say the numbers don't matter, and I get that, and they obviously don't matter to a certain extent. But what you lose by putting Lawrence at 12 and Slade at 13 is you're basically saying that we only have one physical centre who's able to do this, right? So, which is why I would push Lawrence out and try and get him in the wider space, because he's quicker than people probably give him credit for.
It's his best position for sure.
And I'd have someone there that I think can carry in traffic, and I'd certainly be picking my pack with the idea in mind that we're losing Feu-Boso's ball carrying, because the other wingers that we mentioned there are fantastic all in their own way, but they're probably not going to do that kind of work, maybe with the exception of Tommy Freeman to an extent, but I don't think is the best way to utilise him.
No, I agree. And enter Tom Willis if you want someone to pick up some carrying workload.
Well, this is the argument I'm going to make week on week.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, well, as you say, any team that loses someone like Feo Boso, who has that, not that I want to use the term God-given talent that you can't necessarily teach. He's got the physical attribute and characteristics that you just can't train naturally. He just has his power to weight ratio.
What he brings, 100%. What he brings is the bit that we lost. We probably didn't know. We didn't appreciate what we were losing when Jack Knowles stopped playing for England. And having that player out there that you can use like a running back who's just nuggety and great in traffic and loves the physical aspect of it.
Fights for every metre.
Yeah. If you don't have someone like that in your back line, really in your back three that can do that, you really do lose a lot of your options because you're relying on your pack to do an awful lot of work.
I don't think Ollie Slightholm is as close as we're going to get to another Feo Boso, though. So if he's fit, I think we can still slightly play.
Yeah, he probably could do it in almost as effective a manner. But at the same time, is that the best way to use Ollie Slightholm? Because with his finishing and pace,
probably
not want him there at the end of the move rather than in at the ruck. You know, I don't know. I mean, you know, you probably could use him in that way and still get the best out of a whole backline. But for me, I want Slightholm on the end of you know a Marcus Rubber.
Feo Bosa almost shows up best when he's kind of in and amongst the forwards. He's getting that little offload and he punches through the defensive line where he shouldn't. But we're agreeing. Okay. But those are the questions. So to the listeners, if you want to have a question answered by us and our endless rugby wisdom, send us an email at Rucks, Mauls, Oval Balls @outlook.com. Send it. No questions will be too big, no questions too small, and we'll do our best to answer it. The only other thing I've got, and this is something I received on TikTok, is just to do a little shout out for someone. There is a young chap in the Saracens Academy called Zach Jones who had some pretty bad news at the start of the season, and he's had a fracture, which means he's not able to play rugby for ages and ages and ages. He's missing the entire season, and his dad's asked me to give him a little shout out just to keep the spirits high. So all I'll say is, Zach Jones, the Saracens Academy, keep your head up. Injuries are part of the game. You'll come back fitter. You'll come back stronger. Use the time you've got. Watch as much rugby. Watch as much rugby as you can. Do the studying. Do the theoretical work before you get into the practical. But yeah, hope you go well and hope all goes well. But yeah, that's all I've got, Rory. So
everything.
We'll bring it to a close. So that is the end of episode 1 of the Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls podcast. I have been your host, David Jones, and you've been joined by our co-host, Rory Lane. And we will be back again, abusing your ears some point in the near future.
Catch you then.